I didn't want the castle. I didn't want the deed, the iron key shaped like a rib bone, or the lawyer's thin smile when he said the word, congratulations. The cliff road up to Ravenska felt like a test the land gave to the living, wind knifing from the sea, salt biting the eyes, gulls circling like slow, hungry thought. When I reached the crest, the castle rose from the rock as if the cliff had clenched a fist and pushed it skyward. The walls were dark, veined with damp, scarred with lightning. And even before I stepped out of the car, the first whisper slid across the stone, a dry, papery breath that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, almost forming my name. If stories like this grip you, subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss what the castle does next. I told myself it was wind trapped in arrow slits, a trick of acoustics. I told myself many sensible things while the key trembled against my palm, though I'd swear it wasn't my hand shaking. My uncle had died alone here. That was the only sentence the lawyer trusted. Everything else was varnish, ancestral, historic, unique opportunities. There was no mention of what it means to inherit a place that remembers more than people do. No mention of walls that keep speaking after the last voice goes still. Inside, the entry hall smelled of old water and cold iron. The chandelier hung low, its crystals like teeth. Wardrobes waited like tall, patient mourners along the corridor. The whispering thickened the farther I walked, not louder, denser, like fog you could carry in your mouth. I tested words out loud just to hear a human sound, hello. But saying my name in that house felt like signing a ledger I hadn't read. The library sat behind a door with a crack shaped like a bolt of lightning. Maps bloomed across the walls, seas the color of bruises, coastlines drawn by trembling hands. Dust lay everywhere, but not evenly. There was a clean stripe across the long oak table, as if something heavy had been dragged from one end to the other recently. I hadn't hired anyone yet. No caretaker, no cleaner. Perhaps my uncle had moved it before he. The thought trailed off when I saw the book. It wasn't on a shelf. It rested open in the middle of the stripe, fat as a ledger, its leather the same tired black as the sea outside. The pages didn't move, but the air around them did, like breath. I said I wouldn't read it. Then I told myself just the first page. That's how compacts begin, with a small permission. The ink was brown and brittle, and the handwriting looked like it had been taught by the tide, upstroke, pull, retreat. There were dates, column after column, reaching back centuries, keys given, rooms sealed, voices heard. Beside each entry, a note in the margin, small verdicts, private court decisions. Harmless. Misleading. Unbearable. The latest date was last winter. My uncle's name was there. Under voices heard he had written, the nursery, most of all, the hour between 3 and 4. Under verdict, do not answer. It would have been easier to breathe if the whispering had stayed vague, a shapeless tide in the walls. But now I had a map, a time, a room. Awareness does not comfort, it sharpens. I closed the book. The whispering thinned, as though the walls had stepped back to let me move. Dusk was bleeding into the windows when I found the nursery at the end of the north wing, a narrow door with a horse carved into the knob, its mane worn smooth by vanished hands. I checked my phone. 3:07, I told myself I'd open the door, prove it empty, and sleep elsewhere. My fingers touched the horse's neck. From behind the door, very gently, a young voice spoke my childhood nickname, one no one had used in 20 years, and asked if I could please come in. The horse-shaped knob was cold beneath my fingers, colder than the iron railing I had gripped outside in the salt wind. My childhood nickname still hung in the air, thin, small, precise. Nobody alive should have known it. The voice had the weight of memory, but the breath of something still present. I froze there, listening. Behind the nursery door, silence stretched thin, and just when I thought I had imagined everything, a second whisper followed. Softer. Almost coaxing. Please, come in. I told myself it had to be some echo from my own head, dredged up by the castle's suggestion, the way a cavern shapes a single word into endless responses. But the handle shifted against my palm, just slightly, as though a small hand inside had tried to turn it first. The door groaned open. The nursery smelled faintly of chalk dust and seawater. Moonlight from a cracked window laid pale bars across the wooden floor. Old toys stood in ranks, a rocking horse with its mane eaten by moths, a dollhouse taller than a child, blocks scattered across the carpet as if someone had just risen mid-game. Dust should have cloaked everything, but the room was disturbingly clean, like it had been in use. I whispered my nickname back into the room, half in defiance, half in fear. No reply. The only sound was the clock against the wall, its hands forever frozen at 3:15. My uncle's warning in the ledger scalded my mind, do not answer. Yet I already had. The rocking horse swayed, just once, as if something had leaned away from it. I stepped closer. The walls here carried the same papery whisper as the hall, but sharper, more childlike, a chorus layered over itself. I made out fragments, giggles turned brittle, sing-song syllables that melted into a hiss. Every phrase slid around the edges of sense, until one lodged sharp enough to cut. Stay with us. I backed against the doorframe. My heel struck something small and hard. I bent down, a marble. Its glass belly held a swirl of red too deep to be dye, too murky to be paint. When I set it back on the floor, it rolled in a perfect line toward the dollhouse. It struck the front step and rattled to a stop as though delivered home. Something inside the dollhouse moved. A shutter creaked open. I don't know what I expected, mice, maybe, or wind. But through the tiny window, I saw a miniature room perfectly furnished, firelight flickering on its walls. And for an instant, a child's silhouette crossing from one side to the other. I jerked back, but the flame inside continued to burn, oblivious to scale, casting shadows far too large for a toy. The whispers thickened, drawing close around my head. Stay, play, never leave. Each voice wove into another, until they became a lullaby sung by something that had never been a mother. The book's warning pulsed again in my skull, do not answer. But my voice had already crossed the threshold. My breath already joined theirs in the room. The dollhouse fire guttered once, then roared, light spilling out as though the little house had become a furnace. My own shadow leapt across the nursery wall, huge and twisted. And then a sound cut through every whisper, a sharp knock from inside the dollhouse door, 3 steady raps. The toy door began to swing outward, and whatever waited behind it was pushing to come through. The tiny door creaked wider, its brass knob no larger than a coin, yet the sound carried through the nursery as though a vault were opening. My throat tightened. I told myself I was leaning too close, letting fear magnify details. But fear can't invent shadows that stretch the wrong way. From the dollhouse doorway, a hand slid out. Not porcelain. Not wood. A hand, pale as moonstone, small as a child's, but slick, as if dew had risen from inside the skin. It patted the dollhouse step once, twice, as though testing gravity. Then it gripped the frame. I staggered back, striking the rocking horse. It shuddered beneath me, squealing on its rusted springs. The whispers surged, higher now, less like paper and more like water rushing through cracks. The dollhouse trembled, spilling dust from its roof beams. The hand withdrew, but not in retreat. It beckoned. Once. Twice. 3 times. I slammed the nursery door. The knob throbbed against my grip, as if something inside were tugging back. Only when I jammed the old latch down did the room fall still. My breath echoed in the corridor. For the first time since arriving, I realized the castle itself seemed to wait for my reactions, testing what I'd resist, what I'd obey. I fled down the north wing toward the kitchen. The air there was warmer, though it reeked of iron and mold. Copper pans dangled from hooks, mottled green with corrosion. A table stood in the center, still set for one, a plate rimmed in dried soup, a fork bent slightly at the neck, a wine glass half filled with liquid too dark to be wine. And beside the glass, folded neatly, lay a note. The handwriting was unmistakable, my uncle's. The same shaky tied script from the ledger. 4 words only, don't feed the walls. I gripped the paper. The ink was still wet. Behind me, a hollow knock began. Not from the door. From the stone itself. First to my left, then to my right, a slow tapping like someone rapping from inside the masonry. Each strike puffed chalk dust into the air. The walls were answering. I ran. My footsteps bounced through the hall like another presence chasing me. I didn't stop until I reached the grand staircase. Above, a stained glass window poured broken colors across the landing, saints with hollow eyes, swords raised against shadows. The glass rattled though no wind touched it. The whisper returned, sharper now, syllables braided into something like speech. I pressed my palms over my ears but the words burrowed through, we hear you. We hear you. At the foot of the stairs lay another object out of place, a ring. Heavy, tarnished silver, set with a black stone that drank every shard of stained glass light. I knew without knowing how that it belonged to my uncle. I also knew he'd never have left it willingly. When I touched it, the castle sighed. The sound came from the foundations, from centuries of stone adjusting. The whispering paused, as though holding its breath with me. I should have dropped the ring. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket. A heat spread against my thigh, faint at first, then pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Upstairs, a door slammed. Then another. Then another. One by one, as though something unseen was moving from room to room, locking me into the castle's throat. The last door to slam was at the end of the hall, the nursery. And when it closed, the faint sound that followed wasn't a whisper or a knock. It was the high, delighted giggle of a child who knew I had just joined the game. The giggle lingered long after the doors stopped slamming, drifting through the stairwell like smoke that knew where it wanted to settle. I gripped the banister until splinters pressed into my palm, afraid that if I let go, the sound would pull me upward like a puppet on strings. I forced myself to move toward the front doors. Heavy oak, black iron hinges, bolts the size of my wrist. They looked ancient, but surely not unmovable. I braced my shoulder against them, shoved until my teeth clenched. Nothing. Not even a creak. The lock wasn't stuck, it was holding itself shut. Behind me, the stained glass saints flickered as though a torchlight procession marched outside. But the window looked out over the cliff face. There was no ground for anyone to stand on. Still, shadows danced across the panes, figures with no faces, carrying nothing but their own bent silhouettes. "Stop it," I muttered, voice cracking. "Stop it, stop it, stop it." The castle didn't stop. It listened. The whispers returned, layered so thickly they became a chant. My name again, stretched and braided until it sounded like a curse. Then a phrase that froze my breath, "You wear his ring now." I glanced at my pocket. Heat radiated from the silver band even through the fabric. I drew it out, meaning to fling it across the hall, but the stone pulsed once, like an eye opening. The stained glass window shuddered violently, panes spiderwebbing with cracks. If I dropped the ring, I knew the glass would burst inward. If I kept it, the castle would know me as his heir. I kept it. The chanting died at once, cut like a string. In its place, silence spread so total that I could hear my pulse racing in my ears. The air smelled of salt and ash. A choice had been made, though not by me. The grand staircase groaned. I looked up. One door, and only one, had remained open when the others slammed shut, the one at the very top of the landing. It yawned black, the hall beyond sinking into shadow deeper than the rest of the castle. Something wanted me there. I climbed, each step aching with the weight of centuries, as if the wood had memorized every footfall that ever pressed it. The higher I went, the louder the wind outside grew, though the windows stayed shut. By the time I reached the landing, the sound was a roar, yet the candle in the sconce beside the open door burned without moving. Inside stretched a hallway lined with portraits. Men and women with my family's eyes stared from cracked canvases. Some frames hung empty, canvases torn away. In one, only the hands remained, clutching the sides of the frame as if trying to climb out. At the end of the hall stood a tall mirror. Not dusty like the rest. Polished. Waiting. I stepped closer. My reflection met me halfway, but it didn't move when I did. Its lips curled upward into a smile I didn't wear. And then, in my own voice, it whispered the nursery words, "Please, come in." The mirror surface rippled like black water, and my reflection extended a hand, not to mimic me, but to reach through. The mirror's surface quivered like a pond disturbed by a stone, but no stone had touched it. My reflection stood calm, smiling, while I trembled in front of the frame. Then its hand pressed outward, breaking the glass plane as if it were a thin veil. The sound was not of shattering but of something wet, a membrane tearing. Fingers, my fingers, reached for me. I staggered back, but the hall tightened around me. The portraits loomed closer, their eyes wet and glistening now, following me as though they expected me to accept the handshake. The whisper rose again, now in my own cadence, my own inflections. "You're already inside. You've always been inside." I turned, ready to flee, but the corridor stretched. The staircase that should have been behind me receded into fog. The only anchor was the mirror, glowing faintly like a portal. The hand beckoned. I told myself it couldn't be solid, that I could swipe through it and find nothing but air. I reached forward, not to take the hand but to test the surface. Cold met me first, then pressure. Not glass. Flesh. A grip clamped over my wrist, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. It yanked. The surface of the mirror sucked against me like quicksand. My arms sank past the elbow before I could wrench back. My reflection grinned wider, teeth too sharp now, eyes too dark. The whisper became laughter, rolling through the corridor in my own voice. I screamed, and the portraits screamed back, mouths tearing wider than paint should allow. The noise tore through me, but in that chaos, something else stirred. A second voice, softer, hidden beneath the madness, "Don't let it take you. Don't let him in." The grip faltered. Just for a moment, but enough. I tore free, stumbling onto the hall's rug. The mirror rippled violently, then stilled, my reflection returning to normal, mimicking my ragged breaths. I crawled back until my shoulders struck a frame. My uncle's portrait loomed above, eyes burning with the same ink script lines I had seen in his ledger. And scrawled across the canvas, fresh as if painted that moment, "The ring is the key." The silver band in my pocket pulsed hotter, almost unbearable now. I pulled it out. The stone inside had changed, no longer opaque, but swirling with faint images. Rooms of the castle. The nursery. The library. Even the mirror corridor itself, seen from impossible angles. It wasn't just jewelry. It was an eye. And something on the other side was watching me through it. The portraits began to tremble, frames rattling against the wall. Dust showered down as the castle groaned with a hunger I finally recognized. The note in the kitchen had been no metaphor. "Don't feed the walls." My uncle had been warning me that the house consumed memories, names, flesh. But the ring wanted me to give it more. I slipped it onto my finger, half in defiance, half in surrender. At once, the mirror shuddered, its surface boiling with black water. My reflection leaned closer, lips moving in silence. Then I heard it, clear, sharp, from just beyond the veil, a child's voice, desperate, crying my name. Not whispering this time. Not coaxing. Pleading. And against all reason, I knew it wasn't a trick. It wasn't the house. It was someone real. Someone trapped. The mirror's hand rose again, but this time, it wasn't smiling. It was beckoning with urgency. And I had to decide whether to reach back, before whatever else lurked behind the glass took its place. The hand pressed against the glass again, trembling this time, not with menace but with urgency. The child's voice rose sharp and frantic, "Please, don't leave me here." I froze, torn between every warning the castle had already given me and the raw ache in that voice. It didn't sound like the whispers, or the cruel giggle from the nursery. It sounded alive. Real. Human. The ring seared my finger. Images tumbled across its black stone, rooms flickering like camera reels. The nursery. The dollhouse. The mirror corridor. And within each, a pale outline of a child, shifting from frame to frame, as if the castle itself were trying to contain her. The whispers fought back, a chorus hissing through the walls, "It isn't yours. Don't take what's ours. Stay out. Stay out." But the voice on the other side of the mirror didn't fade. It rose above the chant, cracking with fear, calling my childhood nickname again. My chest clenched. Whoever, or whatever, she was, she knew me. I stepped closer. The glass quivered like stretched skin, cold mist bleeding into the hall. My reflection's eyes darkened, shifting into hollow pits. It mouthed words my ears couldn't catch, but the hand that reached through was still small, still childlike. "I'll regret this," I whispered. I grasped it. The cold was instant, flooding up my arm, an ice tide rushing straight to my skull. My vision blurred. The hall twisted, stretching thin as paper, then tore. I fell. Not through air, but through silence, crashing onto a floor of black marble slick with condensation. Shadows towered like pillars, and far above, a ceiling of rippling water sealed the sky. I wasn't in the castle anymore, yet the castle was still inside me, the whispers echoing, muffled, furious. The child stood before me. A girl, no older than 10, skin pale as candle wax, hair plastered wet against her cheeks. She looked at me with eyes too large, too knowing. "You shouldn't have come," she said, though she had begged me to. "Now it will see you too." Before I could answer, the marble beneath us shuddered. Cracks spidered outward, glowing with faint red light. From the darkness beyond the pillars, shapes stirred, long, thin, wrong. They moved like shadows detached from any body, slithering toward us. The girl clutched my hand tighter. "Run!" We darted across the marble, our steps echoing like drums. The cracks widened, steam hissing upward. One of the shadow forms surged, slamming into a pillar. Stone burst apart, shards raining down in silence. I dragged the girl behind me, searching for any exit. At the far end, a stairway spiraled upward, impossibly narrow. Its steps glowed faintly, as though lit from within. The whispers roared, shaking the whole place, "Don't feed the walls. Don't free what we keep." The girl yanked me forward. "It's the only way." We stumbled onto the first step, the shadows writhing below us, stretching tall, clawing at the air. The stair vibrated under our weight, light pulsing brighter. The ring on my finger flared hot enough to blister. Halfway up, the girl stumbled. Something had grabbed her ankle, a tendril of black reaching through the step itself. She screamed, clutching the railing. I pulled, every muscle straining, but the shadow coiled tighter, dragging her down. And in that instant, the mirror's surface rippled into view again at the top of the stairs, waiting, open, hungry, as if whatever rescue I thought I had chosen was only leading me deeper into its jaws. Her scream cut through the silence like a blade. I dropped to my knees on the glowing stair, gripping her arms with both hands. The shadow's tendril wrapped tight around her ankle, pulling her inch by inch toward the crackling marble below. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, but not just terror of being taken, terror of what she knew waited if she was. "Hold on!" I shouted, though my voice broke. My muscles strained, shoulders burning, every fiber in me certain that if I let go, she would vanish into that dark, unrecorded place forever. The tendril pulsed, and the stairs trembled under us. The whispers rose louder, furious, their rhythm pounding in time with the ring's heat on my finger. Not yours. Not yours. Ours forever. The girl gasped, voice hoarse. It feeds on names. Don't say mine. I hadn't asked her name. I hadn't dared. Now I understood why. The castle wanted identity, the taste of recognition, something more nourishing than blood. The tendril jerked, nearly yanking her from my grasp. I slammed my free hand against the glowing step, and the ring seared brighter. A shockwave of light blasted outward, striking the tendril. It recoiled with a hiss, smoke curling from where it touched her skin. I hauled her onto the stair beside me. She collapsed, clutching her leg, sobbing in short, choked bursts. The mark around her ankle looked burned, black veins crawling up her calf. Before I could ask if she could walk, the shadows below screamed, not whispered, not muttered, but screamed in unison. The pillars shivered. Cracks spidered higher. The entire black chamber was coming apart. We have to move, I told her. Together, we stumbled upward, the stair vibrating as though it wanted to throw us down. Each step flared white beneath our feet. Behind us, the shadows surged up the walls, climbing, twisting, mouths opening where no faces belonged. The girl stumbled again, weaker now. I looped her arm over my shoulders, half dragging her. Her whisper rasped against my ear, "Don't trust the light either. It wants you too." But the only thing above us was light, the mirror rippling like liquid silver, beckoning with deceptive calm. The shadows clawed closer. I had no choice. We reached the top. I shoved her through first. The glass swallowed her whole with a splash that made no sound. Then it was my turn. The shadows leapt at me, a dozen tendrils lashing, cold burning through my spine. I hurled myself into the mirror, ring blazing like a coal. The silver swallowed me. I landed hard on stone. Not marble, not black, but gray flagstones veined with moss. The air smelled of salt and dust again. I was back in the castle corridor. The portraits hung silent, eyes dull, mouths closed. The hall looked ordinary as Ravenska could be. But the girl lay crumpled beside me, breathing shallowly, skin waxy under the chandelier's dim glow. Her eyes fluttered open. "You brought me through," she whispered. "But it will take something in return." Before I could ask what she meant, every door in the corridor burst open at once. Wind howled out, carrying thousands of whispers. Not one voice this time, but a chorus of children, pleading, laughing, crying, all at once. And in the midst of it, a single voice I recognized, my uncle's, rasped, "The debt begins now." The voice of my uncle slid through the corridor like smoke, familiar yet ruined, as if dragged across rusted nails. "The debt begins now." The girl clutched my sleeve, eyes wide. He fed it. He made bargains. That's why it kept him alive so long. Now it wants the same from you. I wanted to deny it, to say I wasn't like him. But the ring on my finger throbbed in agreement, as if it already knew what price I could pay. The doors along the corridor gaped open, each spilling whispers. They weren't chaotic now, they were deliberate, each voice aiming at me. From one door, sobbing pleas. From another, angry shrieks. From a third, the sound of lullabies sung in perfect, venomous harmony. The air thickened until every breath felt like inhaling someone else's grief. The girl pressed her face into my arm. "Don't listen. That's how it gets in." But it was too late. My uncle's voice rose louder, cutting through the din, "You wear the ring. That makes you keeper. Keeper means feeder. A shadow spilled from the nearest doorway, pooling across the floor like ink. It coiled upward into the shape of a man, or the echo of one, tall and gaunt, face hidden behind folds of shifting dark. His hand extended, longer than it should have been, fingers sharp as quills. Payment, it rasped, voice like two stones grinding. One life for one freedom. The girl gasped, trying to pull away. The shadow's hand turned toward her. No. I shouted, stepping between them. My throat felt torn raw, but the sound carried, echoing as if the castle itself considered it. The ring seared hotter, branding my flesh. I realized this was the choice my uncle had faced again and again. Feed the walls, or fight them. The shadow tilted its head. Then yours, it hissed, and lunged. I raised the ring instinctively. Light burst from the stone, a violent flare that seared the shadow backward. Its form unraveled, splitting into scraps of smoke that dissolved against the ceiling beams. The girl and I stumbled down the hall. Doors slammed shut one by one behind us, sealing the whispers inside. The air cleared, but the silence felt worse. We collapsed in the library, the heavy scent of mold and paper swallowing us whole. The great ledger still sat on the table where I had first found it. Only now, its pages had changed. Fresh lines of ink bled across the parchment. Voices heard, the corridor, keeper accepted. Verdict, debt active. My name followed, written in the same hand that had once recorded my uncle's. The girl touched the page with trembling fingers. It's bound to you now. You can't just walk away. I never wanted this, I whispered. No one does, she said. Her eyes were older than her face, weighed down by something I didn't yet understand. A draft swept through the library. The chandelier above us trembled. On the far wall, a shelf cracked open, not like wood splintering, but like a mouth widening. Darkness breathed out, thick and wet. The girl staggered back. That's where it keeps the others. Before I could speak, hands clawed out of the gap, dozens of them, pale, grasping, desperate. And each one whispered my name as though I belonged to them already. The first hand brushed my cheek, clammy and shaking like the grip of someone long buried. Another tugged my sleeve. A third curled its fingers around the ledger as though trying to drag it back into the darkness. The shelf's gap yawned wider, the wood moaning like ribs cracking. The girl shrieked, stumbling behind me. Don't touch them. They're hungry. But the hands didn't lash out like predators. They clung like beggars, desperate, each one rasping my name in a voice that almost matched my own memories, old teachers, distant cousins, people I barely remembered. The castle was spitting them back at me, sewing their tones into one chorus. Please, one voice begged, thin and cracked. Free us. I tried to wrench the shelf shut, but the wood stretched farther, the darkness inside spilling like smoke. I glimpsed more than hands, faces half-formed, eyes glowing faint in the dark, mouths frozen in mid-scream. They writhed like trapped moths, forever burning against an unseen flame. The ring blazed against my finger. The ledger's ink bled across the page, reshaping letters until they formed a command, feed or fall. The girl clutched my arm. It wants you to choose. If you give them nothing, it will take everything. I can't, my throat locked. I won't. The hands clawed higher, crawling over my chest, my throat. Their grip wasn't violent, but suffocating, each one begging, pleading, promising. For a moment, I almost let myself sink into them, thinking maybe it was mercy to give in. Maybe that was what my uncle had done, time after time, until he was hollow enough for the castle to keep. Then one hand slipped through the ring's glow, and I saw it clearly. It wasn't flesh. It wasn't bone. It was memory. A living fragment of someone else's life, warmth drained, voice stolen, name consumed. The house fed on more than people. It fed on existence itself. No, I hissed. The ledger snapped shut on its own. The chandelier above burst into flame, a sudden fireball that lit the library like daylight. The hands recoiled, shrieking, skin blistering into black smoke. They tore back into the shelf, the gap slamming closed with a final, bone-deep crack. Ash drifted around us like snow. The girl stared at me, her face pale as chalk. You fought it. No one fights it. I don't want to be its keeper, I rasped. Her lips trembled. Then you'll have to break it. But breaking it means breaking yourself too. Before I could answer, the castle groaned, a deep, hollow sound that shook every beam. The flames of the chandelier twisted downward, dragging themselves like spears toward the ledger. The book snapped open again, its pages curling as though alive. New words etched themselves across the parchment in frantic strokes. Next room, the banquet hall. Debt demands witnesses. The girl gasped. It's calling them all. Every soul it ever swallowed. I turned, heart pounding. The doors of the library blew open, hinges shrieking. Beyond lay the great corridor, already flickering with shapes, silhouettes staggering forward, dozens of them, hundreds, shadows of everyone the castle had ever kept. And in their lead, head bowed, eyes burning red with exhaustion, was my uncle. He raised his hand, palm outward. You can't save her, he rasped. But you might save yourself, if you give her to them. My uncle's voice dragged across the stone floor like a chain, every syllable brittle with exhaustion. Give her to them. It's the only way. The girl's grip on my sleeve tightened until her nails dug into my skin. She didn't speak, but her eyes screamed louder than any plea. I shook my head. No. I won't. My uncle raised his face. The years of solitude, of bargains, had carved deep trenches into his features, but his eyes burned with something sharper than madness, resignation. You think the castle wants her? It doesn't want her. It wants the weight of choosing. It feeds on the breaking point. That's how it keeps us. The horde behind him shuffled closer, hundreds of pale outlines pressing against one another. Their mouths whispered my name in unison, their voices the hollow echo of wind through bones. The girl whispered, trembling, he's right. It doesn't matter if you say yes or no. Either way, the choice binds you tighter. I stared at her, heart hammering. Then how do we fight it? Her lips barely moved. By refusing the question. By breaking the pattern. But the castle wouldn't allow that. The ledger on the library table flared white-hot, words gouging themselves into the page, decide. My uncle stepped forward, shadows peeling from him like smoke. Do it quickly. Spare yourself. I lasted years. You won't. The ring pulsed so violently it felt like a living heart under my skin. My knees buckled. My uncle stretched out his hand, palm open, as if to collect the girl. The whispers rose higher, a storm of need, filling the library until the shelves rattled and the chandelier threatened to fall. The air reeked of iron and mold. No. I shouted, though I wasn't sure if I was answering him, the castle, or myself. The girl tore free of my grasp and stepped forward. For a moment, my chest hollowed out with horror. But she didn't walk toward my uncle. She walked straight to the ledger, her small hand slamming it shut with a force that cracked the table beneath. Instant silence. The shadows froze, mid-step, mouths open but voiceless. My uncle staggered, clutching his chest. "What have you done?" The girl turned, her face pale, her voice steady. "You fed it pages. I starved it. As long as it cannot write, it cannot bind." The chandelier above us snapped loose, crashing down between her and the horde. Glass exploded, iron twisted, sparks flared. The mob recoiled, hissing as if burned. But my uncle straightened, fury twisting his features. "You've doomed us all. Without the ledger, the castle won't negotiate anymore. It will devour outright." As if to answer, the walls shuddered violently. Cracks ripped through the ceiling, dust raining in choking clouds. The shelves groaned, books flying open, pages flapping like wings. The girl ran back to me, gripping my hand. "Now it will come for the ring. That's the last anchor." I stared at her. At my uncle. At the seething horde that began to advance again, slower this time, but with relentless certainty. The castle itself roared, the sound of centuries collapsing in one breath. The girl whispered, her words barely audible over the chaos, "You'll have to destroy it, or wear it until it eats everything you are." The floor split beneath our feet, flames licking through the cracks. And from the fire below, something vast began to rise, something older than my family, older than the castle, wearing the walls like skin. The fire clawed upward, splitting the flagstones like parchment, and from it rose a shape so immense my eyes refused to measure it. The walls bent inward, as though the entire castle were only a shell stretched across its body. Stone groaned like ribs cracking. Windows warped into sockets. The thing wore Ravenska as if it were nothing more than a mask. The girl clung to my side, trembling. "That's what it really is. The house was never built, it grew." My uncle staggered back, his figure dimming as if even the shadows feeding him recoiled. His voice broke. "You see now why I made the bargains. You see why I gave it names. It isn't a home. It's a mouth." The monster's breath swept across us, rank with centuries of rot. The whispers were no longer scattered. They were one voice, colossal, surrounding every inch of air. "Debt demands the ring. Debt demands the air." The silver band on my finger flared like a brand, searing deep into the bone. My vision blurred. My uncle raised his arm toward me, shouting, "Give it over. Let it take you, and maybe it will rest another 100 years." The girl screamed, clutching my hand tighter. "Don't. That's what he did. That's why it never ends." The monster leaned lower, its vast head splitting the roof. Rain poured in, sizzling into steam against the heat of its skin. Within its hollow chest, I glimpsed thousands of faces, trapped, screaming, hands pressed against translucent walls of flesh. Not ghosts. Not illusions. The devoured. My pulse thundered. The castle wanted my surrender. My uncle wanted my replacement. The girl wanted escape. And I wanted nothing more than to wake from this nightmare. I ripped the ring off. My skin tore with it, blood seeping down my hand. The stone writhed, black mist spilling outward, tendrils lashing like eels in water. The monster shrieked, a sound that shook the cliff itself. The ledger on the ruined table burst into flames without touch. The girl shouted over the roar, "Throw it into the fire. End it." But my uncle lunged. Faster than I thought he could move, he slammed into me, grappling for the ring. His eyes burned with feverish light. It's mine. It was always mine. We fell against the broken flagstones, the ring skittering across the floor, spinning until it stopped at the edge of the widening crack. The fire licked toward it. My uncle scrambled like a starving man after bread, shrieking. I crawled the other way, dragging the girl. The shadows of the horde pressed closer, chanting louder, their words binding into one relentless beat, choose, choose, choose. My uncle's fingers closed over the ring, just as the fire surged upward, engulfing him to the waist. He screamed, body convulsing, but his grip held. The stone pulsed once more, brighter than ever, and his scream turned to laughter. I'll be keeper again. It will spare me. The girl buried her face in my chest. If he puts it on, it'll never die. The castle will live forever. I looked up. My uncle's hand lifted, trembling but certain, sliding the ring toward his finger. And behind him, the monster's 1,000 mouths opened wide, waiting to receive him like a bride. My uncle's laughter rattled the rafters as he raised the ring, fire clawing higher around his body yet leaving the hand untouched. His eyes glowed with a hunger I had never seen in any living man. The monster bent lower, stone walls buckling as its hollow chest split wider, ready to cradle him back into its endless hunger. The girl's grip crushed my arm. Stop him, if he wears it, no one ever leaves. The castle will keep breathing forever. I lurched forward, my body broken with exhaustion, yet some buried part of me surged alive at the thought of being chained here for eternity. My uncle's grin widened as he slid the ring over his blistered finger. The air ruptured. Every candle in the castle flared blue, every portrait screamed. The whispers sharpened into a blade of sound. My uncle threw his head back in triumph, until the laughter cracked. He looked at me, eyes wide. It won't accept me. The girl gasped. It's chosen him, she whispered, staring at me. The ring seared into my uncle's hand, sinking through flesh, through bone. He shrieked as his body twisted, folding inward, skin cracking like old parchment. The fire devoured him whole. Where he had stood, nothing remained but the echo of his final scream, caught forever in the chorus of the devoured. The ring clattered to the stones, unclaimed. I stood frozen, trembling. The monster lowered its colossal head, eyes of burning void settling on me. Debt demands heir. You are keeper now. I wanted to hurl the ring into the fire, to end the line, to deny the curse. But the girl caught my hand. Her small, scorched fingers pressed against mine. If you destroy it, you destroy yourself. The castle will swallow us both. You have to trick it. Break the pattern without feeding it. The monster roared, flame tearing through the ceiling, the cliff itself groaning as if ready to collapse into the sea. The ring pulsed once on the floor, waiting. I bent, picked it up, blood dripping from my torn palm. For a moment, the temptation nearly broke me, the thought of slipping it on, gaining power enough to command the whispers, perhaps even to free her. But I remembered the ledger's words. Verdict, unbearable. Instead, I turned to the girl. What's your name? Her eyes widened with horror. No, you'll give it to the walls. I shook my head. No. I'll give it back to you. I spoke her name aloud, not guessed, not stolen, but remembered. A memory buried deep, from childhood summers the first hadn't thought about in decades. My cousin, lost young. The same girl who had vanished one winter, leaving my family broken and silent. Her face matched, aged only in sorrow. The walls shrieked. The monster convulsed. To return a name, not surrender it, this was the break. The pattern unraveled. The ring cracked down the middle, light pouring from it like molten glass. The monster screamed as the ceiling gave way, stone collapsing, sea wind flooding the hull. The chorus of whispers shattered into silence. The girl squeezed my hand, tears cutting tracks through the soot. You freed me. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed everything was her smile, not eerie, not twisted, but the smile of the child my family had mourned. When I woke, I was on the cliff road, dawn breaking, the castle behind me nothing but ruins spilling into the sea. And in my palm, a shard of black stone remained, warm, whispering faintly, as if the debt was not ended, only waiting.